queen baiting. Gay stewards prefer to call themselves queens. Queens are open, daring, and know how to take care of themselves. Queer is not their word. It's hurled at them from outside to insult them, as in, you goddamn fruit queer. But queen is respectful inside talk. When you liked them, explains Pete Brownlee, a straight waiter who worked on the Matson liners, you called them a queen. On some ships, there are queens who reign supreme. Manuel Cabral, known as the Honolulu Queen, is an outrageous, acid-tongued Portuguese-Hawaiian waiter on the Matson liners. Straight seamen are careful never to cross him. There are others, like Miss McDonald. In private, queens and other gay men call each other waitresses or stewardesses, union sisters as well as union brothers. We didn't use the word gay, Jim Vieira says. No, it was girls' names, or Miss Cook, Miss McCormick, Miss Blair. Generally, queens camp it up only in the crew sections of a liner, the gallery, the glory hole, the alleyways. When they were around passengers, they knew not to flitter and flutter, explains John Cremona, another straight steward. Sometimes the camping turns into a drag show, such as this one that stewards from the Lurleen put on as a benefit for orphans in Hawaii. But most of the time the passengers don't know about the gaiety that's going on below them. Nor do they overhear the stewards complaining about their inhumane living and working conditions. Even among themselves, stewards have to be careful about talking about unions, because Mr. Roth and his fellow ship owners will fire any union organizers on the crew. The Cooks and Stewards Union, which once tried to improve wages and conditions, is now weak, and it can't protect them from being fired. They and other West Coast seamen's unions lost a major strike in 1921. They lost their hiring haul too, and their wages fell. Living and working conditions worsened, and union membership declined. Stewards and other seamen are now hired by agents off the dock in what waterfront workers call shape-ups. You bribe the agent to get and keep your job. Seamen have no minimum wage and no right to strike. They are temporary workers. They don't make enough money to get married or support a family. Many are not U.S. citizens. They are treated as social outcasts, and they are at the ship owner's mercy. Not every Pacific liner has an all-white crew. The Dollar Steamship Line, which owns more ships than any other U.S. company, competes with Matson for the Asia trade. R. Stanley Dollar, the company's president, is known for hiring seamen in China at 1/3 the pay that the white American stewards get. This increases his profits while keeping his crews racially divided so they can't organize. When the Matson Company hires Asian stewards at all, they have to work in the laundry room and sleep in separate quarters. And this divide and conquer strategy works. Ship owners exploit China's workers, while white unions attack them, sometimes with violence. The Marine Cooks and Stewards Union, like nearly all unions on the West Coast, has built solidarity around excluding Asian workers from its ranks. They formed their union in 1901 to protect themselves from what their constitution called competition from alien and inferior races. Even Chinese American stewards were not allowed to become union members. On the West Coast, union meant white and male. By 1933, Revels Caton had been a steward on West Coast ships since he was 14. But neither the Matson Line nor the Dollar Line will hire him or other black stewards to do work on their liners. Caton is the grandson of Hiram Revels of Mississippi, who after Reconstruction was the first black senator in the United States. For years, Revels Caton had sailed on the H.F. Alexander and other Alexander liners. He went to work at sea because the Alexander ships did hire black workers in its stewards department. African-American stewards were allowed on the Alexander ships in 1921, 1 year before Caton came on board. Because the white seamen went out on strike and the shipping company hired black strikebreakers to replace them. For years, strikebreaking had been a form of black protest against racist union policies that excluded them. When white seamen lost that strike, the Alexander ships kept the black stewards at lower pay as insurance against future strikes by white unions. These newly employed stewards formed an association financed by the ship owners that was in reality a company union. In return, the black stewards agreed to stay away from the real unions. The white cooks and stewards working for Matson have the best working conditions on any West Coast liners. Hiring agents tell them they're lucky to be working at all. They're still angry about their worsening conditions and scared to death of being fired for organizing. They know that millions of less fortunate men and women are barely able to survive. But they feel powerless, and they appear to be hopelessly divided. Racial hostility, queen baiting, and union busting keep their divisions wide open and raw, and keep alive their fear of losing what little they have. But below a deceptively calm surface, you can see signs of change. Take the Alexander ships. Black stewards are segregated, but they are developing leaders. The company union on the Alexander ships won't let Rebels Caton sail anymore because he's joined the Communist Party. So Caton is hanging around the waterfront learning to organize his fellow unemployed workers. His dream is to organize the black seamen into a real union. In port cities from coast to coast, other left-wing maritime workers, many of them communists, some of them gay, are organizing too. It was, quote, an underground movement of wonderful left-wingers, recalled Ted Rolfs, a gay left-wing steward. These guys were so inspiring in their objective, he said, which was to create a new union of the rank and file and make it democratic. It's June 1933. President Roosevelt is signing the National Recovery Act after months of debate in Congress and despite the opposition of big business. He calls the NIRA a new covenant among employers, workers, and government that will bring the country out of the Depression. The law guarantees a new deal for labor, the right to organize and bargain collectively. It protects them from being fired for joining a union. It ends employer attacks on union organizing drives and union elections. It paves the way for a minimum wage and maximum hours, and it bans company unions, or so it reads on paper. A few weeks later, President Roosevelt tells the nation, "It is obvious that without united action, a few selfish men will pay starvation wages and insist on long hours of work. Now the workers of this country have rights under this law which cannot be taken from them." Merchant seamen are stunned at what they hear. The president is actually promising them that the federal government will defend their right to organize into unions so that they can stop the ship owners from exploiting them. United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis, who helped to write the law, puts it more bluntly. "The president wants you to organize," he tells workers who aren't in unions. And within weeks, the most dramatic wave of labor organizing in U.S. history sweeps the nation. On the ships and waterfronts, rank-and-file seamen and longshoremen begin to take over their weak and corrupt unions. They're even talking about going out on strike. Equality was in the air we breathed. The Monterey has returned to San Francisco from a cruise in the South Pacific. The crew has heard rumors that a strike is underway on the West Coast. When Jim Vieira and the other stewards walk down the Monterey's gangway onto the Matson Pier, they see strikers marching back and forth along the waterfront, so they too join the picket line. While the Monterey had been out at sea, the Longshoremen's Union had gone out on strike for union recognition, decent wages, and their own hiring hall. The seamen's unions, including the marine cooks and stewards, had decided to join them. Together, they are now shutting down all shipping on the West Coast. As more ships come into port and more crews walk off, the strike spreads. Before long, 100 vessels are tied up in San Francisco Bay, including the Matson White liners, the Dollar liners, and the Alexander ships. Anchored in the bay is a scab ship that is set up by the Dollar line to house the strikebreakers. Shipowner agents are trying to recruit unemployed black men as strikebreakers again. But the longshoremen, for the first time, opened their union to black workers. The Marine Cooks and Stewards Union does the same thing. And now, for the first time, leaders of the black community call for black workers not to break this strike, but instead to work with white unions to win it. Rebels Caden goes down to the Alexander ships to talk to the stewards. He tells them they can't survive in a company union and their only hope is to join the MC and S. They're skeptical, too. They're torn. Many black stewards decide not to scab this time, but they stay off the picket lines. They want proof that the white union's talk about racial equality will turn into action. But other black stewards do join the white pickets, standing together against police and getting arrested together, too. The idea of solidarity with white working men is a huge act of faith for these stewards. They are staking their futures on the outside chance that if the white unions win the strike, white men will treat them as equals and come to their defense when they are attacked. And nothing in their experience tells them that they can trust the white unions to do this. They're taking the risk anyway. The Marine Cooks and Steward Union sets up strike kitchens on all the waterfronts. In San Francisco, the Maritime Palace Kitchen serves 15,000 meals a day to strikers. Among the men preparing and serving the meals are black stewards from the Alexander ships and Asian stewards from the Dollar Line ships. Gay stewards of many races are also working in the strike kitchens. The worst day of the 1934 strike is on July 5th, when the ship owners used force to reopen the port of San Francisco. When police approach the picket line and the strikers refuse to leave, police shoot tear gas and bullets into the crowds, hitting bystanders as well as strikers. All along the waterfront, fighting breaks out between strikers and police. Blood ran red in the streets of San Francisco yesterday, one reporter writes in the Chronicle. The furies of street warfare raged for hour piled on hour. Hundreds were injured or badly gassed. 2 were dead, 1 was dying, 32 others shot, and more than 70 sent to hospitals. The strikers call this day Bloody Thursday. The 2 strikers who police shot in the back and killed were Howard Sperry, a longshoreman, and Nicholas Bourdois, a cook. The Marine Cooks and Stewards Union adopts Bourdois as one of their own. 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon, the city of San Francisco stops to honor the 2 men killed on Bloody Thursday. Tens of thousands of Union men and women march in a silent procession from the waterfront up Market Street. After the funeral, nearly all San Francisco unions, in solidarity with the maritime workers, go out on a general strike that shuts down the city and most of the West Coast. With this support, the longshoremen win their demands. And 2 years later, the seamen win their demands in a strike supported by the longshoremen. Their victories are part of a wave of union organizing in which millions of women, people of color, industrial workers, and tenant farmers are organizing for the first time. Union membership in the U.S. more than triples, from 3 million to 9 million members in just a few years. Finally, the stewards' lives are beginning to improve. Their wages go up, and now they are paid for overtime. They have their own hiring hall with the power to hire crews for each ship based on seniority, not on payoffs. The Marine Cooks and Stewards Union sets up a strike kitchen on all the waterfronts. In San Francisco, oh, excuse me, I went backwards, excuse me. The hundreds of black stewards on the Alexander ships have left the company en masse and joined the Marine Cooks and Stewards Union. Rebels Caton recalled that the long struggle for Negro and white unity was on. The Chinese stewards on the dollar ships are allowed to join the union too. Chinese American and African American stewards, though, are still on segregated ships and have second-class union status, and the Lurleen still has an all-white crew. After the strikes are over,